Yes, Philadelphia, you are watching live, if you are watching live, on Facebook, on LinkedIn, on YouTube, on X, all over the world, and maybe even in parts of outer space. You are watching the Sports Porch Philadelphia, and we do drop that podcast, as you can see if you're watching on the ticker. We drop it on the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or anywhere you get your frickin' podcasts. Here I am, your technical director, of course, in studio and coming from parts unknown outside of Austin, Texas, is Rube, the frustrated Philly fan, now living in Texas. What's up, Rube?
Howdy. I was hoping, since the Grand Schwabini's out this week, I was hoping I was going to get to say wherever you get your frickin' podcasts.
We'll work it in.
So, if you could work it in, that would be very cool.
Absolutely. I mean, if it's a dream of yours, Rube, who am I to deny that?
Let
Seriously.
a man dream.
So, for those of you who catch our show or listen on a regular basis, yes, the Grand Schwabini, we're just going to say he has the night off. Does that work?
I think that'll work. I think that's fair.
Yeah, we'll wait till next week. So anyway, what do we do here? Well, we talk all things Philadelphia sports. We're just a bunch of fans, and we like to just tell it the way we see it. And there's a lot of things to talk about this week. We're going to follow the usual playbook here. We got page one. We're going to do a little Phillies autopsy. Page two, we're going to talk about the Eagles. They did win, and I text out. I don't think you were part of this text group, Rube, but I did text something out in the beginning of the game because I was able to watch the whole game. It was somewhat underwhelming. Page three, we're going to talk about around the NFC East. A little funky, not what we really expected. It's a little early to talk hockey, but as you can see, Rube is in the mood. Yes, with the Flyers shirt on. Almost said Phillies. I'm wearing a Phillies hat because I still believe. Okay, I still believe.
You may be the only one.
There's got to be somebody. And then we're going to do a little what we're watching, what we're streaming, give you, something that you can spend your time trying to forget about the National League Divisional Series and move on. So the last thing I want to do before we get into that is remind you that you can always follow the Sports Porch Philadelphia on YouTube. It's youtube.com/@Philadelphia Sports Porch. And we are live there too every Monday night, 6 p.m. Eastern time or thereabouts. Page one, Phillies autopsy. What happened, Rube? Let me hear it from you. What do you think happened?
I'd like to say I didn't see this coming since the All-Star break, but I think, most Philly fans are pretty educated. We're an educated group.
Yeah.
And I mean, listen, they weren't the same team in the second half of the season they were in the first half of the season. I looked up the numbers. They're a 500 team. They were 33-33 after the All-Star break, which I didn't realize. I knew they weren't great. Not terribly shocked by what we saw because we were not playing our best baseball going into the playoffs.
Right.
However, if you would have told me at the beginning of the season that we win the NL East, we win 94, 95 games, whatever it is, 95 games, and we get the 6th seed and an opening round bye, I'd say I'd feel pretty good about that.
Yes.
But it just goes to show you that it's the team that's the hottest, not the highest seed, that seems to always come through in this new baseball wild card tournament. We saw it with the Phillies for 2 years in a row. And this year we're the front runners, and we limped into the playoffs and we were exposed. So that's what I saw.
Of course, the Grand Schwabini, he has his opinions and he wanted me to make sure that he got him into the show. So I'm going to talk about my feeling on this series and what happened. It's very simple. And then we're going to get into his, okay? Because I think he's got a few more thoughts on this. As always.
And I wanted that to be my opening statement, but right. my guess is that we're going to all share a lot of common thoughts. So go ahead and lead it off, and then I'll feather in some things.
Okay. Well, I think the most important thing, the two most important things, one you touched on, the Mets were riding a high. They were, they blasted their way into the playoffs. They blasted their way through the first series, and they basically blasted their way through the Phillies. And if I'm a Mets fan, the question is, can you keep this momentum going? Because that's what you have to do. And was this the Mets all year? No. They finished, they finished 16 games above 500. So, in another universe, in another year, they could have been in first place, but they had some hot bats. They had some good pitching. They wrote it in. Lindor played great. Alonso, guys that we admittedly talked about last week, we'd never heard of, only because we're not Mets fans. But, so the Mets were riding a high, and they played great. The other thing was the Phillies bullpen completely fell apart. I mean, it's a historic collapse. And we've all seen some bad collapses. And that's where I would start, what were they doing in the days that they had off to prepare themselves for this? And I'll lead into what Schwarber had to say. His question is, who is the most to blame? He's always looking for blame. Who do you blame? And a lot of us are. Do you blame Dave Dombrowski? For me, the answer there is no. He put together a team that finished first in the National League East. The last 3 years, right, has made the playoffs.
3 years straight. I take that.
Yeah, I don't think you can argue that their lineup and their pitching has consistently been in the top 10% of the league for these years. So the answer I have there is no. Topper, do you blame Topper? Mark likes to blame Topper. If I have this right, last week what we were talking about is he was managing the game the way you'd expect him to manage the game. He even made a switch in the first 3 games of the Mets series, starting pitchers that Schwarber wanted him to do when we were talking about the playoffs weeks ago.
Yep.
So I'm not putting words in Mark's mouth, but I'm thinking, no, you don't blame Topper, right?
I don't blame Topper. I think it's pretty dang clear who you blame.
Well, lay it on me, and then I'll give you the rest of his list of our choices.
I think you blame the players. Listen, yeah. Trey Turner said it in the post-game conference. The coaches can tell him all day long not to swing at bad pitches and to be choosy when you're up to bat.
Right.
And he said, but ultimately, it's the guy in the box making the decision at the moment. And so, I blame the players for not executing, first and foremost. Right? We swing at bad pitches. Like you said, our bullpen, I don't know what the heck happened there. I think we can have some discussion around that. And I think it starts with perhaps you need to go get a big boy closer, because we're asking our bullpen to do unnatural things this year because we didn't have a full-time closer. And perhaps that could be part of it, that these guys were just overworked, Strom and Hoffman and those guys. But I put the blame fully on the players, and I think if you would ask the players, they would say the same thing.
Well, yeah, and that's, I mean, any team or any player that has any sort of class is going to take it on his shoulders and say he didn't get it done. So, Schwarber's choices were then the Phillies bullpen, Aaron Nola, and Trey Turner. The Grand Schwabini is going with Dave Dombrowski. He allowed the 7 through 9 hitters to be abysmal and did not get quality outfield help or a closer. Unbelievable to have ERAs all season long between 1.6 and 2.50, and they think they were blasted for this email. It didn't print out right. So he's blaming Dave Dombrowski, and I categorically disagree with that. I go more with the bullpen didn't get it done when they were handed a lead, and then the Phillies bats didn't get it done when they had an opportunity in at least one of those games to add a couple more runs on before the starter went out to give a cushion. I mean, it's one thing to come in during the regular season when you're having a great season and you come in the 6th or the 7th inning and you only have a 1-run lead. I mean, there's pressure there, but there's a hell of a lot of pressure when you come into the 7th inning in the playoffs and you're the 1 seed or the 2 seed and you've got a 1-run lead. There's a hell of a lot more pressure there. So I too blame the players, but more specifically, I blame the bullpen. I mean, that's what you're paid to do. You got a 1-run lead in the 7th inning. The guy pitched a gem. You're supposed to hold the other team, and not only did you not do it, you let them destroy you. So, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, listen, there's credibility for sure in um, how we have put this team together. I can't blame Dombrowski. Maybe Austin Hayes wasn't the right answer at the trade block or at the trade
Yeah.
deadline, play left
Yeah.
field. I mean,
Right.
unfortunately, he had injuries, he had a kidney infection, everything that could go wrong went wrong for the guy. Is it different? I don't know much about Austin Hayes. My friend who's a Baltimore Orioles fan may be able to tell me a little something about that, Mr. K.
Yeah.
But boy, we sure didn't improve our outfield. And I'd say if anything, we got to go figure out how to go get major league hitters in left field and center field to set the table. It's very odd that outfielders are at the bottom of the lineup, and that's about where we're at, with the exception of Casty.
Yeah, I mean, I think because baseball is so analytics based now. In our lifetime, in previous times, I see you have a dog trying to get your attention. I've got one down here below me as well. Anyway, as you know, it's we've kind of gone away from that classic because of analytics. Back in the day, your corner outfielders, they were the guys that they would hit home runs. Your center fielder was the guy that stole bases. Left or right field, one or the other hit home runs. Your second baseman, he was the guy that was batting seventh. So I think we need to think about overlooking those monikers for those positions now. And it's more about getting the right mix in the lineup. And no, I mean, Austin Hayes is a good player. Honestly, I don't know a whole lot about him, but I look at it and say, when it comes to injury and sickness, what are you going to do? You can't blame that on him. So was he a good pickup at the deadline? Yeah, he would have been a solid pickup if he would have been able to play, but he wasn't able to really play.
What do you think about this, Chris? Let me ask you a question. So, blame game. It's
No, I just want to
easy.
get this comment in here. Lemmer says your mother-in-law is listening, so we're gonna have to keep it PG from now on, Rube. I know you have trouble with that.
Big shout out to my mother-in-law, and very sorry about her Detroit Tigers. It was a nice run.
Mm-hmm.
I was rooting for them, but ultimately, I think Cleveland's pretty tough. So
Yeah,
I digress.
Yeah. So what did you want to run by me?
If I'm sitting here thinking, I was thinking about this during the series because we kind of saw this coming, right? You called me negative last week, but it played out exactly as I said it would play out. If we lose game one in New York, we're going to lose them both, and it's not coming back. Um, I to me, there's just a philosophical problem that we've been exposed on the last 3 years, whether it's in the World Series, the NLCS, or NLDS, and it's just chasing bad pitches. So, do you blame the hitting coach? I don't know what to do there. This guy Kevin Long supposedly has been with Topper a long time, but clearly either he or Topper is not getting through to these guys because we continue to chase garbage, and it's doomed us 3 years in a row.
Right.
What do you think?
It's really hard for me to when I see a team play as well as the Phillies have played the last few years. It's really hard for me to disagree philosophically with the way they run the organization and how they stack their lineup and fill their pitching roster, because it's not an easy thing to do. And so you end up winning 95 games, and again, your bullpen looks fantastic through the year, and they collapse at the end of the year. It's hard to win the World Series. Baseball, it's a grind. It's a grueling sport. It looks really lackadaisical for, 6 of the 9 innings on every game. But some of the games it looks lackadaisical for like 8 of the innings.
Yeah.
But it's a grind. It's a grueling sport. You have to be in tip top shape. It's not like the guys from the 60s and the 70s. They could go out drinking all night and and go play baseball. They had jobs in the off season. These guys are professional athletes. So to be able to put a roster together that is consistently competitive and get you to the playoffs, I find it hard to disagree. Now, you had mentioned before, my original favorite team was the Orioles. And we all know how they've performed for basically since Cal Ripken retired, and even a little bit prior to that. It's hard to put a team on the field when you have money, let alone when you don't have money. So I don't think, this kind of leads into what the Grand Schwabini's plan is.
Okay.
I don't know if you read it. I don't know if I answered your question or not, but I think I did by saying I don't think there's much you could have done differently, and I don't think that there's much that the Phillies should. I don't think they should change course at all.
So
I do
here's
think
what I'll tell you. Me and the Grand Schwabini have known each other a long time. So I'm gonna tell you, I'm gonna pull up my crystal ball because I saw the Schwabini sent some notes ahead of time, and you just tell me how close I am because I didn't read through them all. So you tell
Okay.
me how close I am, and we'll take it from there. How's that sound?
Okay. Yeah, that sounds great.
Okay. All right. Number one is let's start with Topper. He's kind of been a victim of his own success. First, the World Series, 3 years in a row in the playoffs. Took a team that was underperforming, took them to the World Series, shocked the world. Could do no wrong. Then we come back the next year. We do sneak in. We go on another run, and then we lose in the championship series.
Right.
We take another step back this year, and not only do we lose in the division series, I would argue we should have been swept, if not for a hit by Castellanos.
Right.
We're swept out of the playoffs.
True. Yep.
So, that's performance down, down, down year after year after year. Is he getting through to the players? Is he the right coach? It's really hard for me to tell, but I got to tell you, it's hard to fire somebody who's got you to the playoffs 3 years in a row.
Right.
So I say you stay the course with Topper for another year and you see if we can't make some adjustments. Now let's talk a little bit about adjustments.
All
So
right.
why don't we start in the outfield? And I said this a little earlier. Number one is Marsh and Rojas are not starters in the major league. They're good piece players. Rojas looks like a nice outfielder, but he's a deficiency when it comes to hitting. And if you win in the World Series, you can't have glaring deficiencies like that. I think we need to go out and we need to get people, players that can hit for average, make contact, and set the table in left and center field. That's number one. Number two, let's talk about, since we started with the outfield, let's talk about the infield. You're set. Harper's not going anywhere. Listen, I don't care what anybody says about Harper. He's worth every freaking penny we've paid the guy and then some. He's your first baseman for the future. Period. Hard stop.
Right.
Stott, I think, is a quality infielder, good player, quality glove, has some speed, hits for decent average, like to see more contact. I think you're set with Stott as an infielder. Maybe it's not your second baseman. Maybe he moves over and plays shorter third. Terribly, terribly disappointed in Boehm and Turner on the left side of the infield. Listen, we paid Turner a hell of a lot of money. He appears to be a very good hitter, a fast runner. He's not clutch, as we've seen the past couple of postseasons. And one of the things that surprised me about Turner this year is that I thought he was a little bit better of a fielder.
Right.
And, I didn't always feel comfortable. When the ball was hit the Jimmy Rollins or Larry Boa or whomever it was, it was an out. When I look at those guys at short and third, it scares me to death. You're either going to get a great play or you're going to
Right.
throw it over Harper's head, um, and that's problematic. So can we trade? Well, somebody's got to be willing to take Turner, perhaps out of this market in a smaller market, and maybe we pay for a little of his contract, but I think enough is enough. Let's either go find another shortstop that can hit for average and has a good glove. We don't need bashers. Or we bring up a kid. We bring up someone from the minors. I am not terribly familiar with what we've got in the minors as far as infielders go, but I'm betting the Grand Schwabini had something to say on that.
He did.
And then I'd say with Bohm, hey man, love what you show me. Love the hair, right? He's got Chris Klein hair, maybe even
Right.
better. Um,
He's got
he
more
see,
money to take care of it. That's for sure.
he's got a lot of money to take care of it.
Yeah. Yeah.
But man, the last two postseasons he's been dreadful to the point where you got to bench your all-star third baseman. Something's got to change there.
Yeah.
So, um, and then with JT, I think you're seeing the wear and tear on our catcher. If we can figure out a way to play him 100 games and not 160 games, and those other 60 games are not because he's on the IR, I loved what this Marchand gave us this year. He seemed to have a rocket arm, and he seemed to be able to hit, get rid of the Stubbs Joker, right? I like the culture thing, but it's time to move on from that, and we're going to have to change some things. So that's outfield and infield. We can talk about pitchers next.
Right. Well,
How close am I?
yeah, you're pretty close, actually. The Grand Schwabini's plan includes exactly what you said about Marsh and Rojas. They can be bench players, they can be traded, but they need to get guys that can hit in center and left. They have to put the ball in play. He does note their number 3 prospect, Justin Crawford, plays center field and left field. So there you go.
And he's got a pedigree. He's Carl Crawford's son.
Right.
So yeah, I'm excited about him. I have heard of him.
Right. He also mentions considering trading Trey Turner. He's a good player, but he hasn't been great in the postseason.
Mm-hmm.
And defensively, he's a liability, moving Stott to short. And as far as the minor leagues go, he's in the end, though, Schwaber thinks you're going to keep Trey Turner. I agree. I don't see them trading him. But their number 1 prospect, Aiden Miller, is a shortstop, and he's being talked about like he's the next Mike Schmidt. Who knows? Trade Alec.
Those are big shoes. Okay.
I know. Constant. And but these are always comparisons that people make about number 1 prospects. So who the hell knows? Trade Alec Bohm. You're going to have to give up something good to get something good. So include him in a big trade if one's made. At times the Grant Schwabini thinks he's the best pure hitter on the team. But as you said, Rube, the last 2 postseasons have been pretty miserable, and his attitude is not the greatest. And he's not great at third base. Maybe move Trey Turner to third, something like that. So I think, in general, you guys are pretty close to the same page when it comes to the offense and then the defense in the field. Yeah. How do you feel about the pitching?
It's hard to feel bad about the pitching. If it wasn't for that dang meltdown against the Mets, it's really hard to feel bad about the pitching, right? You've got, I think I'd put our first 4 against anybody with Sanchez, Suarez, Wheeler. Nola did exactly. I guess the Grand Schwabini cursing Nola didn't really help because he did exactly what we said he would. He'd go 5 and he'd start giving up runs. But listen, you've got as good a starting first 4 as anybody.
Right.
The Taiwan Walker. I just I saw something a couple weeks ago where someone was starting a GoFundMe for eating the rest of for the Phillies for eating the rest of his contract. I feel terribly for the guy, but he's got 72 million reasons why he's not going to feel all that bad.
Right.
And we bring up this kid Painter, who's our number 1 prospect. He had Tommy John surgery. So maybe it's not an immediate thing. Maybe you bring the Spencer Turnbull guy back. He's our 5th starter, and Painter by the All-Star break, he'll have come back from Tommy John surgery, hopefully showed what he needs to, and we bring him up the second part of the year. Those are the starters. How can you argue with that?
No, I don't think you can. And as far as the Painter situation is concerned, um, Mark feels the same way. Andrew Painter's the fifth starter, and see if he can be the Phillies' Paul Skeens. I mean, those are big shoes to fill. But as far as covering the Pirates, I said this all year about the Pirates. As far as Paul Skeens was concerned, look, he's got to do the same thing next year that he did this year, and then I'll consider him a lock. But coming up 1 year, you're talking about guys that are paid a lot of money to hit the ball, so they've seen a lot of pitches. So we'll see. But I think I agree as well. I think that the starting rotation is not bad at all.
Yeah.
How do you feel about the relievers and what happened at the end of the year?
Yeah, I kind of mentioned this earlier. I want to call it an aberration, if that's the right word.
Right, right.
You can't be good for 5, 6 months. Um, I the Mets had our number. It was unfortunate, 1. 2, even with all the rest, it kind of felt like Hoffman and Strom, and to an extent Kerkering, were kinda put in unnatural spots because we don't have a true closer. Um, it was great to get rid of Neris, and then who's the other guy? We got rid of Sir Anthony, and
Yep.
those guys, they would just drive us nuts year after year after year, and we were left with, is it Alvarado? Alvarado,
Yep.
right?
Alvarado. Yep.
Who, he could throw hard, but he had control issues as well, to the point where he wasn't, he was possibly not even gonna be in our lineup for the playoffs. I think we need to go out and, listen, we've invested all this money and all these players, and our window at some point with Harper and others is going to start closing because age is going to catch up. I think we need to go get a closer, a first
Yeah.
tier closer. I think everybody wants this kid from Oakland.
Yep.
Um,
He's a
you know,
Pittsburgh boy. Yep.
what's his name? Mason something or other.
Yeah. I'll look him up.
Miller.
Yeah. Mason. I think his name's Mason Miller. Yeah.
Mason
Yeah.
Miller. Yeah.
Yeah. And
Um,
he's from the Pittsburgh area.
So so I don't I think I would I'm not ready to give Strom. I think I was looking at the free agents. I think Strom's under contract through 2025. Hoffman is a free agent. I think you bring him back.
Yep.
Kerkering is getting better. He was brand new last year, and he's got another season under his belt.
Right.
Um, so, I think the guts are there for a good pitching staff. I think we've gone so long with this closer by committee, and if we re- and the experiment with what's his name Kimbrel last year, that was a disaster.
Right.
I think we need to go out and get a stud closer,
Yeah.
and I think that really will help.
Yeah. I don't disagree with you. You have somebody that can come in and actually, have it get a 6-out save, something like that. Wheeler wins game 1. That's
Yeah,
one of the points the Grand Schwabini was making. We need to go out and get a guy that is a shutdown closer so that when you hand a slim lead off, first of all, if you're handing it off in the 7th inning to your middle relief guys, they know they've got backup on the back end. So it takes a little pressure off of them.
yeah,
Number one, baseball is a very mental game. Number two, maybe your starting pitcher makes it to the 7th inning and your bullpen is a little gassed, but you have that closer. He comes in for the 8th and the 9th, and he can shut people down. So yeah, I agree with you there as well. I mean, the bottom line here for the Grand Schwabini is you have to change the complexion of the team. And it's a very good team that crushes regular season play. But in the playoffs, when teams can exploit your weaknesses, like for the Phils, high chase rate batters and bats going cold, with which both tie together, that's trouble. I mean, I don't know that you necessarily have to change the entire complexion of the team. I think honestly, if they were going to make one move, and let's say that they were not allowed to do anything but just make one move, I would get that closer, because that really is what led to disaster in the postseason. That's if you're going to narrow it all the way down. That's what led to the disaster. Was that bullpen had nobody on the back end that was going to come in and shut down the other team.
Yeah. I would just for the sake of debate. It's an interesting question. If I could only make one move,
Right.
and you're not too far off, right? We got a lot of salary tied up for the next number of years that aren't going to be easy to just trade or get out of. So
Right.
I think we've got the team we've got. If I had one move to make, boy, I would trade Bohm. And
Really?
I would trade Bohm.
You would
And
you would sit on that pitching staff.
I would sit on I would, because to me, if you can score, if let's say instead of being up 1-0, we're up 3 or 4-0, that takes the pressure off as well.
True.
And the fact of the matter is you don't score runs, you don't win. There's only
Yes.
so many close games you can play. So to me, give me uh give me a consistent glove and a hitter that hits for average, and give me that all day long. I think that's what I would do. It would either be that, or I gotta go after a center fielder that can get on base consistently.
I think that's very interesting because I look at the lineup and I say, I concede all the points that have been made about, left fielder, center fielder, whatever. Yeah, the bats went quiet in the playoffs, but they still, uh, they still gave up all those runs, And I'm hesitating right now because the hockey Jesus has showed up in our studio, so I'm trying to kind of coordinate a bunch of stuff.
No
So
worries.
that's it for the Phillies. Let's move on because now their season is over. They've got moves to make. I'm sure the Grand Schwabini will catch up with him next week, and we'll recap all of this again.
Uh,
See, he sends emails and lists and stuff like that. When the rest of us, we don't have to take notes. We know what we're
well,
doing.
well, tell me this, Chris. How close was what? All in all, how
Yeah.
close was I? Would I get an A,
Oh man,
B, C, or D?
I would give you an A minus.
Okay.
Maybe if I'm going to be super critical,
Yeah, please.
maybe a B plus. But
Okay.
overall, I'd give you an A minus. I mean, he was completely. Let me pull the email back up, the one I was reading. He was lockstep center fielder Martian Rojas. Consider trading Turner, trade Alec Bohm, get a lights out closer. He's going to pay to keep Hoffman. He wants to sign him. Let Estevez and Alvarado go. He talked about the catcher. I get a much better backup catcher as JT seems to be getting injured more. Starting rotation is fine. Bullpen, Hoffman, Strom, and I mean, I'm going to give you an A. I mean, you guys are pretty much right there. He wants to blame Dombrowski though. I don't know how you can blame him. I see where he's going with that because he's saying you need all these different players and this and that and these puzzle pieces. But I'd say as far as putting the puzzle together, I mean, you can't ask for other than winning the World Series, which they did go to 3 years ago. You can't ask for a much better performance from a GM.
We just got to fix some flaws. We got to fix some
Right.
flaws. And so
Exactly.
I don't know if it's changing the complexion of the team, but I think the book, certainly not, I think everybody knows the book is out on us. So, from the perspective of how do we change the book and how do we flip the narrative in the script, some changes are going to have to be made. So,
Right. Right.
I think we can all agree on that. And you know what? They gave us a fun season to watch.
They did.
And it's unfortunate, but I feel good going into next year that we can be a playoff team again.
Yeah, I think next year's next year. But yeah, I think riding it into next year, they will make some moves and we will talk about them when they make them. Let's go to page 2 now. You're watching or listening to the Sports Porch Philadelphia. If you're watching us every Monday night at 6 p.m. Eastern Time, it's on Facebook, LinkedIn, YouTube, or X. And of course, we do drop the podcast right after the show on the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or anywhere you get
your friggin' podcasts.
There you go. How'd that feel? Did that feel good, Rob?
Oh my God, that felt terrific.
You just exhale. Everything's going to be all right.
All right.
Page 2. Hey, the Eagles won. They won. And I'm going to tell you what I text to my co-host on our Pittsburgh-based show in the beginning of the game. I want to say, was it the first quarter? Yeah. I said, look, I don't care if after watching the Eagles, it was before they kicked the first field goal. After watching the first couple series, I was like, I don't care if the Eagles, I don't care how this game ends up. Okay. The Eagles they better win this game. I don't care if it's 3-0. That's how bad it was looking as far as I was concerned, because there's no way. Cleveland's offense is horrible. And I don't think there's any debate to be had there. You know, we could talk all we want about Deshaun Watson and his misgivings. And yes, that makes him a horrible person, of course. But that shit doesn't happen on the football field. Their play on the football field is just atrocious. He's atrocious. And their defense is good, but it's good because they're fast. And they have a guy like Myles Garrett. And they have guys that I don't know, they have something to prove. But watching that game, this is what I saw, Rube, and then I want to hear what you saw. I saw an offense that, in spite of the fact that it has a guy named Jalen Hurts, a guy named Saquon Barkley, a guy named A.J. Brown, and a guy named Devontae Smith, does not seem to have an identity. It's almost as if they have too many stars. Now, I don't think that one of them shouldn't be there, but I feel like at times they've got too many mouths to feed, and that clouds the way they plan the game, make the game plan, because I did not see a game plan coming out on the field there from Kellen Moore. What do you think about that?
When I watch the Eagles play football, it's like, you remember when you were a kid and you drew up the plays in the dirt and you say, Klein, you go out and you do a button hook. Schwab, you run the fly, and DeFlitch, you run it 10 yards and out, and I'll hit one of you guys.
Exactly.
That's what it feels like when I watch this team play offense. And I mean, listen, you told me last week, you're like, Ruby, you're so negative, and my wife and Leslie listen online. She's like, man, you need to be more positive. But man, you live in Philly all these years, and you just get used to disappointment. And listen, so I'm gonna flip it on its head, Chris. Here's what I'm gonna do. I'm gonna go positive. I want to talk about kind of the good and what I saw in the game. And then we can talk about the bad and the ugly, including our immature coach. So let's talk about the good. Jalen, no turnovers. First time I have seen him have a no turnover game in, I don't know, a long, long time. He adjusted, started 0 for 5, then went 16 of 20, 2 touchdowns. Certainly very helpful to have AJ and Devontae back.
Yes.
And so, I would, he made some good runs, he made some decent reads, and he got the ball out of his hands. There was none of this like holding onto the ball and then having to throw it away.
Right.
So I would give Jalen a B, a B plus. I think from the perspective of, we got Dotson involved in the game yesterday. We actually used a play that worked a couple of times with these underneath routes to Devontae.
Yeah,
right?
The second one was magnificent. Yep.
It was beautiful. We didn't pick anyone illegally. We just ran it the way it was supposed to be run. And goodness gracious, we can throw the ball over the middle instead of throwing it outside, which in the first part of the game, it was all outside. It was all shots outside. So I think good for Kellen Moore for recognizing that, and I think good for Hertz for taking that underneath and letting your players play the game, right? That's very San Francisco. Getting the ball in the hands of your playmakers and let them go make plays.
Yeah, and
So, on offense, those were my positive. Those are the two big things I took away as positives.
yeah, and I agree with you. No turnovers by Hurts, so that was a definite positive. I think it helps that Brown and Smith were back.
Oh my gosh, yeah.
Yeah, I mean that's a big help. And I'm kind of reading the notes that Schwabini sent. I mean, that was for me, that was a positive. And it's not that I didn't, it's not that I'm being negative. It's, and I appreciate your attempt to become a positive Philadelphia sports fan, because those are rare nowadays, especially
It's
nowadays.
hard.
They seem to be
It's hard.
getting close, but no cigar.
It's ingrained. It's been ingrained me for many years.
I know. I live there. I lived through it.
Yeah, yeah, you've seen it, and I haven't even talked about the defense yet, which I think there's some positives to take away from the defense as well. But yeah, what are you hearing from the Grand Schwabini and on his positives offensively?
Well, his positive was the same. No turnovers from Jalen, which I find to be a positive. But the offense takes too long to get going. And is Mailata okay? The other thing is Goddard okay? He got hurt as well.
I'm starting to worry about injuries,
Yeah, but that's
especially Goddard. Man, we talked about at the beginning of the season how valuable he was
yep.
if he stays healthy, and he's just not staying healthy. And I think it's
Yeah,
some. I think like we did when Ertz was here and we got Goddard and we were ready for the heir apparent.
right.
Uh, I think we've overvalued Goddard's ability to stay on the field, and
Right.
it leaves us with Calcaterra played a pretty good game yesterday. Actually,
He
was it
did.
Calcaterra stole? Yeah, we had some big plays to our tight ends, which
Yes.
was really nice to see.
Yeah.
That usually doesn't happen.
Yeah.
But
And Mark
yeah,
talked about Calcaterra prior to the year. So
did it? Yeah,
um
okay.
prior to the season beginning. So I mean, the negatives are, he's exactly right, and I agree with him. The offense just doesn't. I look at it as, okay, Kellen Moore has all these weapons, and he's instituting his offense, and then you had Smith and Brown out, and it was kind of tough. Now Smith and Brown are back. But you've got this shiny new weapon in Saquon Barkley, who's actually quietly having one of the better seasons of a running back in the NFL right now. And
Oh,
one of his,
Chris, you're gonna make me go to negative town just by
I
saying that name. Uh,
yes,
okay,
why?
please, go ahead.
Yeah,
Well,
why?
I thought he was terrible yesterday.
Well,
I thought
well, he was terrible yesterday.
I thought he was terrible. He almost cost us the game yesterday.
true. 18
Um,
carries for 47 yards is not a really good showing for him.
Forget it.
Yeah,
Forget that.
yeah,
There was a critical time at the end of the first half that everybody knows about where he didn't get the first down.
true.
God, how does he not get the first down? And then he whiffs on a block and we're
Yes,
sacked. And it makes the field goal that much longer. And when it's that much longer, what do you have to do? You have to kick the
yeah.
ball lower. And we didn't plan for. Oh, I'm going to negative town. I got to stop.
That's okay. That's all right.
But,
It's
but
where you naturally live, Rube.
yeah,
So we can't fault you
I
for
thought
that.
Saquon was really bad yesterday. I hope he understands and sees that, and he's ready for his New York Giants next weekend. Let me
Yeah.
say that.
Well, I think the ugly is that blocked field goal, but it's really hard to scheme for a guy like Miles Garrett, and let Lemmer saying come back from the dark side. But uh, it's really hard to scheme for a guy like Miles Garrett jumping over the line, not making any contact, and blocking a kick. I mean, you're just, if you can't stop that guy, you just can't stop that guy. So that's a one off. I would seriously doubt we're going to see that again this year. So I don't really call that the ugly. Um, the defense now, if we want to move over to the defense, they got 5 sacks. I think they had 6 coming into the game on the year, right? But
Yeah.
here's the thing though, that Cleveland offense is so bad that if they got 1 or 2 sacks, to me that would have been a bad day. You
Well,
know?
after you saw what Washington did to them last week, right?
Yeah,
They had like 7 or 8 sacks.
right.
So, but okay, but it's okay. We're staying positive. We almost matched our total season sack total in one game. let's take the W. Go ahead.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. Poor coaching. What led to the blocked field goal, almost costing them the game? That this is the Grant Schwabini's notes. I don't think, like I said, we already addressed that. That's a one-off. That
I
guy, he was, that
he
was
did it last year. He did it last year. He did the same thing against Indiana, against his boy Steichen last year.
right.
And I disagree. I think you see that and you know that's coming. You don't think Andy Reid would scheme for that? You don't think Tomlin would scheme for that and be like, whatever you do, don't let this guy jump over you.
I
I
don't,
I
but
disagree. I disagree
the
with you
point
there.
I'm making is that if I'm out there on the field and I see him getting ready to do that, I don't care how much money you're paying me. I'm not sure I'm going to throw myself in front of that bus. I mean, it's just not something that you can actually scheme for. It's like, here's a, and I can't make that comparison. I'll get in trouble for that anyway. So,
Yeah.
Schwabini says after game antics, Sirianni is a freaking clown, getting pissed and going at it with fans for booing him. How about the press conference was embarrassing. You're on the hot seat, blah blah blah. You know what? This is for me. It's kind of like, look, Sirianni's in a hot seat. Everybody who sits in a head coaching or managerial seat in sports is on that hot seat every single day. And if you happen to be a Philadelphia general manager, head coach, you're on the hottest seat in the country because it's natural for Philly fans to go at you. It's the culture, So it's hard not to be antsy. I think Sirianni is a good coach. That's me. I think he's a good coach. I think that that hot seat is starting to get to him. That's what I think.
I think why make the seat hotter for yourself? Show some emotional intelligence.
Right.
And I think he lost a lot of credibility in the eyes of me. His players are saying good for him, but the next time that AJ Brown goes off on Jalen on the sidelines, Sirianni has no right or no credibility to say behave like an adult. And I expect
Yeah.
I'm just gonna go parent here. I'm disappointed. I'm disappointed in that. Dude, if you had just won the Super Bowl or you just beat a team that matters, then okay, maybe. However, of all the teams from the NFC East that have beat the Browns, we beat the Browns, who are horrible, right? For everything
Right.
you had already said, Chris, by the least amount of points.
Yeah. Well, you still won. You know what?
So, however, he just it's just I think you're right. I think the hot seat has gotten to him. But you know what? You get paid millions of dollars. You've signed your name on the dotted line, and you're making this seat hotter for yourself. You over talk in press conferences. You over explain. It's almost like you're trying to justify to your team that you really have their back and that it's us against the world. And I just don't think it's appropriate all the time. So stop over talking, stop defending everybody all the time, and stop with the nonsense.
Two words when you put them together that drive me crazy: emotional intelligence. Don't use that phrase anymore.
But it's exactly apropos. It's exactly apropos for the situation.
I don't think I ever heard that phrase in my life until my wife got really pissed at me once. And next thing I know, it was emotional intelligence all over the place.
Well, Chris,
Okay.
I've known you for, give or take 25, 30 years, just in, have spent
Right.
large doses of time with you, and I think your wife is 100% right.
Yeah, I knew that was coming. I'm going to exercise some emotional intelligence here and agree with you. Okay. Not why I was saying that. I wasn't saying she was wrong. So I think that the NFC East in general, when we flip in the page here on the Sports Porch Philadelphia, I think it's interesting that the Cowboys got destroyed yesterday by Detroit.
That made my day. That made my day more than watching the Eagles,
Win.
let's just call it win. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. It was hard. Hey, become a Steelers fan. That's every win.
Let me tell you something, Steeler fan. I have their defense in fantasy, and you
Yeah.
guys killing it. And
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
if you would have told me the Steelers had the record that they had, we all picked them. I think the majority of us, when we were doing our selections, we had them bottom of the
Yeah.
North, right?
Yeah.
So good for them.
Yeah. Yeah. So, but looking around the NFC East, it's nobody could have seen that, or nobody would have seen that it would be this close, this far into the season. You look at the Commanders at 4-2, and down to the Giants at 2-4, with the Cowboys and the Eagles both at 3-2 in the middle. And I think all the Jaden Daniels believers, yes, they lost to the Ravens. It was a fairly close game. But looking at that from the outside, that is what I expected. If believe it or not, if Washington was going to be a better team overall, it was, we are going to score a lot of points against the Ravens, but in the end, we're going to end up losing a one-score game. And that's what happened. So it wasn't a victory, but it was an impressive showing against a team that arguably should be near the top of the AFC.
Baltimore's figured it out.
Yeah.
And they're going to be tough, and their defense hasn't been great, but they'll figure that out because they usually do.
Right.
And yeah, I think Washington showed very well against a very, very good team.
And here's a stat in the NFC East. Now, this is a stat I use a lot when I'm analyzing baseball, when I'm looking at the standings, because when it comes down to analytics and all of these different stats that you can use to justify. Yeah, Hockey Jesus, when we have him on in a minute, he likes to say that's a made up stat. You can make up any stat you want. He's not wrong. Okay, he's not wrong. You could pick any time frame. I like to boil it down to one stat, especially in baseball: runs scored versus runs against. Okay, that makes it easy for me. It's like if you've scored a ton of runs and you've given up, and your run differential is 90 or 100 to the positive side, you're having a really good season. That stands the test of time. I'm looking at the NFC East. Now, this is football, so you have a lot less games, but you can kind of do the same thing right now after 5 games. So the points for and points against, the differential, the Giants are -25 and they're 2-4. The Cowboys are -42 and they're 3-2. The Eagles are -6 and they're 3-2. The Commanders are +33.
Has anyone scored more points in the NFL than the Commanders?
They are tied with the Buccaneers at 178 points.
There you go.
And the Ravens are at 177. So they are number 1 in the league, tied with the Buccaneers after that 51. Now that was a 51. They count the defensive points anyway because it's total points. So that's why it evens itself out. But I look at that and I say, who'd have thought that the Cowboys defense would be so horrible? The Giants are pretty much where you thought they would be. The Commanders are well above what everybody thought, and the Eagles are right at 500. I mean, and the differential is a touchdown. Mm-hmm. So you look around the NFC East, and you have to look at who's coming up here. But this could end up being a slugfest because Dallas's defense is not going to be this bad all year.
Well, they're hurt. I mean, truth be told, they ran into a juggernaut. I mean, they made Goff look like Bart Starr last night. And no Micah, no DeMarcus Lawrence.
Right.
Their best cornerback's been out all season.
Right.
So you kind of saw that one coming.
Yeah, and the majority of that -42 actually came last night. So yeah. Exactly. So it's going to be. I think it's going to be a fun year in the NFC East. Maybe not if you're an Eagles fan because you expected to be, to separate yourself. But going forward, let's just take a look at the schedule here real quick and see what the Eagles got coming up on their schedule. And then we'll move on to hockey and what we're watching. But so next week we have the Giants in New York, and that'll be an interesting game. What do you think about that game? Then we have the Bengals, Jaguars, Cowboys, Commanders. But let's talk about next week's game against the Giants.
Yeah, listen, playing at the Meadowlands or whatever they call it these days at MetLife has always been a little bit of an Achilles heel for us.
Right.
I mean, listen, on paper we should beat them. Let's be clear.
Yep.
But anything, it's hard to guarantee a win with this team. I watched the Giants play last night, and I actually thought that they showed pretty well against the Bengals, especially their defense. This Burns guy that they picked up from Carolina is tough. He's a beast, right? I don't know if Thibodeau got hurt, but he was. I don't know if he played the second half. He's tough. These couple guys they picked up in their secondary, Newbin and I forget the other guy, Phillips. They look pretty good on defense. So you shut down Slayton and this guy Tyrone. I forget the running back. I think you'll be okay. It's definitely a winnable game, but you never know in the NFC East, and you never know at the Meadowlands. What about
well,
you?
it's excuse me, it's Saquon Barkley's homecoming. So, if you're Gwenny says go Lions. If you're the Giants, if I'm Brian Daboll, I don't even know who that guy is. Like, is he even a coach? Do you know what I mean? Like,
he was a coordinator for the Bills.
I know. Yeah. I know that, but I'm just saying, like, I look at the Giants and I'm like, I'm really used to them having a personality behind that.
Coughlin or Parcells.
Right. Yeah. Like, you're New York. Get a head coach. Who the hell is this guy? Yeah. Anyway, if I'm the Giants, I'm scheming for one thing and one thing only. I am not letting Saquon Barkley run all over me. That I'm just not doing it. I don't care. If I'm the Eagles, I'm settling into exactly. I'm not feeding Saquon Barkley the ball. I'm setting up those pass plays over the middle. That those plays to Devontae Smith. We're rehashing old news, but those two cross routes to Devontae Smith, I thought were expertly done. And I think the Giants defense I just don't think you can stop that. It's hard to stop that route, especially when he gets up to full speed by midfield and he's running that cross route. It's hard for a cornerback or, a linebacker, let alone a cornerback, to stay with him. So if I'm the Eagles, I'm running the offense. I'm settling in. I'm game planning just to win this game and not turn the ball over, because this is what I like to call a trap game for the Eagles. This is a trap game. You're going into New York. It's Saquon Barkley's homecoming. He's going to want to make a statement. Maybe they game plan for that. I don't think that's a good idea, because I think the Giants are going to game plan not to be embarrassed by Barkley, because they know they're not going anywhere this season.
Here's what I think, Chris. I think you're right. They're going to game plan for him. Obviously, he's one of our biggest weapons, but I think we need to use him differently. I think we need to figure out how we need to go study what Andy Reid did with Brian Westbrook when we had those little slip screens and they get him in space instead of having Barkley try to break tackles at the line of scrimmage. So if you get in a position where, Burns and Thibodeau and these guys are rushing the quarterback, let them come and run slip screens. We haven't done that the whole season. We need to go figure out how to get him doing that.
I couldn't agree with you more. I thought I back to the Andy Reid, Brian Westbrook days. That was one of their most lethal plays.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. It seems so simple, but I guess it's not.
Absolutely. Okay. Page 4 coming up. But before we do that, I just want to remind you, if you're watching us live, you're watching the Sports Porch Philadelphia all over the world on Facebook, LinkedIn, YouTube, and X. Then you can always catch the podcast, because I drop it right after the show on the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or anywhere you get
your friggin' podcasts.
You and Schwab, your timing is impeccable. We have a special guest here, and I'm going to bring him into the studio. Yes, there he is. Testing. Can we hear your mic? Hockey Jesus? There you go.
Testing.
Right.
Let's go, Pens. Oh, wait, sorry. Wrong show.
What are you doing?
Sorry about that, Rob. Hey, this show is going to prove that a Philadelphia Flyers fan and a Pittsburgh Penguins fan can actually talk hockey civilly.
Okay, let's prove that.
I will do my best to be civil.
So here's the reason. Here's what Rube and I were talking about prior to the show. Rube, he's got his Flyers shirt on. Obviously, He's thinking
They do have a great logo, by the way.
They do. I agree. It's
a classic.
He's thinking that it's a little early to have a hockey discussion, but I explained to him that you've actually taken the time because you are Hockey Jesus.
Mm-hmm.
And for anybody who wants to know, Hockey Jesus is on the Pittsburgh Sports Porch, and he gets on after every single Penguins game, hasn't missed one in over 2 years, and does analysis of the Penguins. We've been trying to get the Grand Schwabini to do analysis of the Flyers, but
he's just not a hockey guy.
Well, it's kind of like trying to get him to grow hair. So
it happens, but very, very slowly, and nobody notices.
Very hesitant. And but he's been watching the Flyers, and he has some thoughts. He wants to run that by you, Rube. He wants to give you that perspective here. So I'm going to let you guys have the hockey talk, and I'll break in, and then we'll do what we're watching.
So here's my deal. I actually watched both of the Flyers games. I didn't watch the whole thing. I find it very curious that the Flyers are actually starting on the West Coast. That's got to be
it's weird,
it is so bizarre. And as a Flyers fan, I'd be totally pissed because essentially what you're doing is you're saying, we don't care about hockey the first 4 games of the year because they're all going to start at 9:30 or 10:30, and nobody's staying up for that. You're lucky you're right in the middle, so you get it no matter what. But here's my take on what I saw. Actually, I thought the shootout win was a really good win for them. Just their ability to stick with, I think, who they play, the Kraken?
Vancouver, I think.
Vancouver, yeah. No, you're right. That's right. Yeah, they played against Vancouver. And Vancouver's going to play those gritty games. In fact, Vancouver hasn't won a game or lost a game all year. Both of their games they lost in either a shootout. So they got the point. They got what we call the loser point, which, by the way, how are you with loser points? Do you like them, or do you think they need to get out of hockey?
I don't have an opinion, to be honest with you. I don't mind getting the point, but I love the shootout idea. I hated all the draws in the old days with all the ties. So you can play however many minutes. What is it? 60 minutes.
Yeah,
and
60 minutes.
And
plus the extra 5.
Yeah. I like the way it is. I like the 4-on-4. I like the shootout. I think it makes it much more exciting. And
it's
give me the point.
3-on-3 on overtime, which is even more exciting. I mean, it's
is that what it is? It's 3-on-3? Oh, I thought it was 4-on-4. Yeah, that's awesome.
It's ridiculous because essentially, if you control the puck, you can almost control the puck all 5 minutes if you really are very good at it, and you take good shots, and you can bring people in. That's an interesting take. My take on it is I think the shootout has run its course. I think it's done. I agree with you. I hate the 1 point. I think it just should be, I don't know. They got to find a way to have a winner, because when it comes to the playoffs and you have all those loser points, you don't know how a team's going to play in the playoffs when they have, say, 15 loser points and that got them into the playoffs. But in actual reality, when you play a full overtime period and it's win or lose, you don't know how your team's going to perform. I think it makes it harder for teams to turn it on or turn it off.
Well, Steve, anyway, you're an engineer, right?
I am. Yep.
If I remember correctly.
Analytical about my things. Yes.
Yeah. So here's what would be an interesting KPI or a metric to go look at. Would be, if it's 3-on-3 on overtime, how many? I don't know the stat, but how many games actually end before they have to go to a shootout? Or
my guess is I would say it's 75% or more.
What if you extended the 3-on-3 by another couple minutes or something like that instead of doing the shootout? And how many would that get you to? Would that get you to 85, 90%?
Yeah, I think it would. I do believe it would, because you just get gassed. And I think the thing that makes it real interesting is, they still switch sides in overtime, which now you got that long switch. I wish they would keep them on the same side, because then the switch wouldn't be so easy for you to bring on offensive guys and keep that cycle going. You have to go back almost into your defensive zone to make that change.
We'll call the commissioner and we can.
Yeah, I think we need to get Bettman on that, because I don't know. I feel like the loser point's just dumb anymore. But
anyway, what are you seeing with my Flyers?
Here's what I'm seeing. I think you've got a great first goalie. Ersson is lights out. He's fantastic, but I'm not sure about this. What's his name? Fedotov or whatever his name is.
Yeah, Fedotov or
Yeah,
Fedotov or
Vedofov.
yeah.
He's not very good. He's Jari-esque, if I can use a Pittsburgh Penguin term. He looked bad. Now I know he's young. It was his first start, right? But
It's like his second start ever, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But he didn't look good. I think you got a goalie problem if only Arison is your guy. You got to have a backup goalie. I suggest you come and get Tristan Jarry off of us. He'd make a great backup goalie for you guys.
We need a Swedish goal. We need another Swedish goalie or something like that.
Well, aren't you still paying Brizgalov? I think you are. Yeah, I think so. Anyway, so how about that loss to the Flames? I thought that was a pretty bad loss for them.
I was telling Chris, I somehow or another I've got ESPN Plus through whatever cable deal I got.
Disney, you probably have Disney, right?
We got Spectrum, and somehow or another I've now got ESPN Plus. And after the football games on Saturday night that all went to overtime, I couldn't get to sleep. So I'm paging through, and I see the Flyers are playing Calgary. I'm like, hey, I wonder if they're on ESPN Plus. I go to my phone and gosh dang, and the Flyers had just tied the game like 2-2 or something like that against Calgary.
Right.
Chris or Steve, inside of 2.5 minutes, it was 5-2. I'm like, maybe I shouldn't watch anymore, and I turned it off.
Did you? And I missed this part. Did you see the fight that Forrester got into?
No, but I heard he missed 17 minutes of the game.
Yeah,
because of it. Yeah.
That's one thing I think you want to steer away from. I told the Grand Schwabini this. I think Forrester is your best player. You got to take him off that. I don't know if he's still playing on the third line. The lineup guys say he's playing on the third line with Paling. You got to get him up on that second line. That's ridiculous to have that talent down on the third line. I think that would help the Flyers score more. And clearly he can't be the guy jumping in there. You got to get Ristolainen in there or somebody. Just have him jump off the bench and punch somebody if they're going after your guy. That's the Flyer way, right? I mean, that's the way they've always been known to do it. Not with their talent. They have other people who can come in and do that sort of thing.
Yeah, I forget the guy we had last year. I don't know if he's still on the team. Hold on, let me check. Not Ristolainen. No, not Hathaway.
Hathaway, yeah. He'd be the guy.
He's the fighter.
Yeah, Hathaway'd jump in. He's Garnet Hathaway. He's and Konechny, honestly, he's not a bad choice. But once again, he's your first line center.
Yeah, he's the guy scoring all our points. He breaks his hand hitting somebody. That's bad.
Yeah, he got 2 goals, but yeah. I don't know. I honestly, I don't think the Flyers look terrible. They didn't. I think you're right in the sense you kind of have to just hold off and be like, they're 1-1. Let's see what happens. Here's. Oh my goodness! Wow. Sorry, I didn't realize my analysis was so bad.
Yeah. She loves what you're saying. Yeah.
Wow. Yeah.
No,
that's approval.
Yeah. We've got We've got our co-host for the next show. Just entered, and Sassy doesn't recognize him, so she's getting a little crazy.
One more question on hockey before we go. What are you more surprised
about hockey?
The fact that the Oilers are 0-3 or that Utah is 3-1?
I think that Utah is 3-1. They were formerly known as the Arizona Coyotes, right?
Right, the Arizona Coyotes.
I saw that, and I was shocked that they had actually won a game, and I think they beat someone decent early. But the Oilers are hungover from last year.
I think they beat Vegas like 6-5 or something like that.
Yeah. I think the Oilers are just hungover from last year. They'll be fine.
Yeah. Okay, boys, we got to wrap it up here. Hockey Jesus, thanks for being here as always. Rube, is the power of the sun was upon you there.
Yeah, that was cool.
It was
maybe that was hockey. Maybe that was hockey Jesus. I don't know.
Yeah. I did send you a little bit of sunshine there. Yeah. You're welcome.
I mean, dogs barking, the sun's coming down. Hockey Jesus is here. It's mayhem in the studio. But listen, want to thank everybody for watching the Sports Porch Philadelphia. We're going to move what we're watching to next week. When the Grand Schwabini's back, then all 3 of us will have one. So if you're watching us on Facebook, I'll tell you what, Sassy, I'm going to I think my wife has a muzzle that she meant for me. It might fit Sassy too.
No.
All right. Anyway, thanks for watching the Sports Porch Philadelphia live all over the world on Facebook, LinkedIn, YouTube, and X. And of course, I'm going to drop this podcast in about 15 minutes right after the show on the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcast, Spotify,
or anywhere you get your friggin' podcast.
Sorry, Rube.
You stole my thunder, DeFletch.
And you can always follow the Sports Porch on Sports Porch Philadelphia on YouTube at Philadelphia Sports Porch. For Rube, thank you, Hockey Jesus. I'm your technical director. We will see you next week. Whoops, I ended the music too early.